I read an interesting article today where a team did a study where they took some of the top medical questions on Reddit and then had doctors answer them and then had AI answer them. And patients found the AI generated answers to be both more useful and then interestingly, like dramatically more empathetic. And the question was like, well, how is an AI delivering a more empathetic, a more humane answer than a doctor? And it really just comes down to time, right? How much time and focus does a doctor have to take everything that's in their brain, regurgitate it in a way that's both empathetic and useful to a patient? Not enough, especially with the healthcare system the way it is today. And so it's not that like the AI knows more than the doctor. It can't because it's a closed system, but it can take the time to provide an answer that is detailed and an answer that's humane in a way that a doctor may not have the time to do. And I think that's a really powerful thing where, yeah, we will be interacting with AIs in a way that feels human because of that dynamic.
Get ready for the ProducTea with Leah, your fun-sized dose of business, tech, growth, and product chatter. I'm your host, Leah, and it's time to spill the tea. Top of the mega morning. Welcome to the ProducTea with Leah show. And today I am hosting a special guest, a man who has swiped right on more product launches than most of us have on actual dates. He went from making Xbox more exciting to setting Facebook ablaze and getting everyone to swipe right on Tinder. Now he's on a mission to make us learn faster with an AI coaching platform than we can spell growth metrics. And the man who is outpacing the future, the CEO who believes the C in his title stands for consumer. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure. Please give him a warm welcome, the outpacing overachiever, Ravi Mehta. It is such a pleasure to have you. Hi, Ravi.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I've also swiped right on more product launches than actual dates. So it's good.
Okay, that's good to know. Same for me, by the way. How would you rate this introduction on a scale from 1 to a super AI coaching platform 10?
I think we hit it. I think ChatGPT couldn't have done better.
Okay, right. Fine. Very good. Can you introduce yourself to the fools that may not know you for some reason?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I'm Ravi. I've been a product leader my entire career. I started programming when I was really young and fell in love with technology at around 9 or 10. Got really into gaming and then spent part of high school and better part of college building a game company. So I dropped out of college for a little bit, did that full time. Then went back, finished up my degree, and joined Microsoft during the early days of Xbox, where I was one of the first product leaders working on Xbox. And I was fortunate to work on Xbox Live and do a lot of early thinking around where online gaming was going at a time when we were moving from modem-based communications to broadband, and that was going to have a pretty profound impact on everything, including gaming. And then since then, I've really focused on kind of two things. One is almost everything that I've worked on has had some consumer element to it. I really love how technology and evolving technology impacts everyday people's lives. And then the second thing is almost everything that I've worked on has had some social element to it. I've always been fascinated by how technology connects people. I've worked on Tripadvisor, which helps travelers connect to each other and learn from each other's experiences. Facebook, which is obviously social. Tinder, which helps people discover the people they want to meet and date. And most recently, I've been focused for the last year and a half on Outpace, which is building a coaching platform to help other people level up and be as successful as possible. And in between, I was a executive in residence at Reforge, where I helped the company launch their product strategy program and help them build and launch their product leadership program.
That sounds amazing. I think we could do an entire podcast just with your introduction, which is really impressive. So I have a couple of things to say to this, but let me introduce you back to the audience. So every guest that I have here usually has a relevance to me as well in some way. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't probably be here. So what is your relevance to me? First of all, I think about 3 years ago or something like this, I heard about Reforge. And then I went on to Reforge to do a couple of courses. And the ones that you were on, I think yours was, I think the most popular one was the product strategy and product leadership ones, right?
Yep.
They really blew my mind. They really blew my mind. That this was the first time where I had a lot of this knowledge that I had that I was not so sure whether they make sense. This was my first introduction like to this kind of American way of product management and not like this European bullshit where you just like talk about sales-led organizations. How do you structure reporting lines? You know, like this directive from the top down. This was really an awakening moment for me, and it meant a lot to me, and it really kicked me also off into my own career, and I'm extremely grateful for this. So like there were 2 courses that really got me going there, and in terms of cohort and the things that actually retain and that actually were practically applicable. And That's definitely what you were for me. And then since then, I always had you kind of on my radar. And I said, like, if I ever have a podcast or anything, we're going to have a talk. And this is why you are here now as well. And furthermore, at some point, I think about 1.5 years ago, I had the idea, okay, Leah, you had so many product managers in your life. You need to write something about product coaching or leadership development, that kind of thing. And I figured, you know what? Why don't I just look at this material that I saw from Ravi back then, which was the skill wheel with the 4 main skills and then the 3 sub skills structured by kind of seniority and so forth. And I looked at it and I was like, no, this is already good enough. You know what? Like, this is really, really good. I'm just going to use this. I started to post about it, even when I was relatively unknown, also on LinkedIn, got a lot of impressions for this. And your framework and the one from Petra Wille are my absolute favorite ones that I still reference to today in regards to how to evaluate someone's skills as a product manager, what makes a product team also quite good. And I really, really, really love this.
Oh, nice.
So
What's the second framework that you mentioned?
that's the one from Petra Wille. So her general concept on how to grow strong product people. She's one of the few, together with you, that are always like in the details. And this is something that I highly appreciate. So it's not just like a, like a general overview on how things should be ideally. You always had these little, well, first you should look at it in this way. But, you can also look like with this kind of scale wheel to your team, not just like the individual. And those were things that always stuck with me. And they also reflect reality, in that sense. Like whenever you try to apply something from a course like this and you're like, yeah, this actually fits exactly the way that I also have experienced it. So you're not just starting on a green field. And this was highly valuable. Really love this.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it was valuable. I've gotten a ton of value out of the Reforge material. After I started as an executive in residence, I went through the advanced growth strategy program, some of the program on retention and engagement. And, it's one of these things that really, I think the thing they do incredibly well is just provide a way of thinking about things that helps break through all the noise and organize your thoughts and figure out how to take the next step.
It's an incredible brand. And It's an incredible brand to the point of like, almost every program, or if not all the programs that I took, were really, really valuable for me. Like the only thing that you can do wrong is like to take the wrong course at the wrong stage in your career. Maybe if you've been a product manager for 1 year, you should not take Ravi's course on product leadership. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I should. So 2 things to your introduction. First of all, what was your first programming language? Do you still remember this?
Oh, yeah. It was assembly language. So I started building games in assembly language, and then I moved on to a very high level language called C. And then my first game had probably 90% of the code was in C, but about 10% of the really performance critical code was in assembly language.
Okay, this is funny because I just tried to impress you, but you clearly win this one because assembly is a little bit more complex than QBasic, because that was the first thing that I did on my Commodore 64. That's nice. What I remember. Then I moved to C++. So in my defense, I'm also getting a little bit cooler until I noticed when I was 18 that I was not good at it. So that was the end of my career as a programmer. And at Microsoft, we actually worked both at the same time at Microsoft, except you worked on a cool product and I worked on Windows Wisdom.
What was Windows Wisdom?
What it was?
Whistler or Wisdom?
Vista, like Windows
Vista.
Vista.
Cool.
Like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. No, it was not that cool. Like the entire launch was a bit of a disaster. And I worked out of Switzerland, of course, so I was not we were not working on the core product, but more like on the marketing and so forth. But it was a very interesting time at Microsoft back then. And I have some fond memories. And it's funny because when I introduce myself, I kind of also sometimes mention, like I worked at Microsoft, I did this and that. To be completely honest with you, we're not going to air this, of course. 12 years ago, I had absolutely no clue about product management to the level where I am today. I was an absolute nobody. But people, for some reason, love it like when they can say like, like she worked at Microsoft. It's like...
It's amazing what Microsoft's been able to do. I was worried there in the middle that my time at Microsoft wouldn't be seen as that valuable, that they were decreasing in relevance. And they've really come back and built an incredible business. And I think are now, it's interesting to see how much they're at the forefront of things.
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. And I think also the time where you were there, we had this huge initiative that I remember globally where Microsoft was kind of splitting up between B2B and really like the consumer segment. There was a lot of money involved. I remember numbers of like 150. I hope those were millions, like to kind of split all the country organizations into like these 2 main branches. This is something that I distinctly remember where they try to address also with Xbox, like this digital lifestyle initiatives to bring really like entertainment into the living room of people. And everybody was like, yeah, like this is kind of like weird. It's not going to work and everything. And look at where we are today. It's been crazy. It's been really crazy.
And Xbox was originally formed out of their web TV efforts. And so Microsoft's mission was, how do we get a computer on every desk? And unlike a lot of companies, they actually achieved that. They were able to get a computer on every single desk. And so the question was like, where else should computing go within the home? And the living room was the place. And Microsoft had a number of different efforts to try to do that, and realized actually the entry into the living room wasn't some content-oriented device, but was really going to be a gaming console. And that was the thing that did give them the sort of install base that they have today.
It's a fascinating thing because usually Microsoft's BHAG or Big Harry Audacious goal is usually mentioned as like, yeah, like these are goals that you can never achieve, but they kind of did.
Yeah. What do you do
That's
that?
the funny thing. So speaking of advancements in technology, so you also mentioned that you have an AI coaching business. Can you maybe talk about this, or like your AI coaching platform? This is something that you are passionate about and also launched recently.
Yeah. So when I left Tinder, I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I knew I wanted to go earlier stage. I knew I wanted to start something. And so I spent about 18 months at Reforge, had over 1,000 people go through the product strategy and product leadership program, and got to talk to dozens of people in the middle of their career. And what I heard pretty consistently, and this was especially the case during the pandemic, is that people feel like there's more and more pressure to be successful. There's great resources like Reforge to be able to learn the skills, the hard skills necessary to succeed. But people are often feeling stuck on the softer skills. Like, how do they really influence within their organization? How do they convince people? How do they build a strong brand? How do they build a strong reputation? And I'd known from my own experience that coaching can be incredibly valuable in helping with those soft skills that are essential as you rise within an organization. And something like 95% of people that work with a coach say that they would do it again. So it's this thing that has like incredible product market fit. But the limiting factor has been it's just too difficult to find a good coach, and it's too expensive to afford a good coach. And so 18 months ago, we started Outpace with the goal of making coaching much more accessible and affordable for folks. We were inspired by some of the things that we were seeing in therapy. So BetterHelp and Talkspace, in personal training. So Future and Copilot are really good examples. There's some interesting examples in the healthcare space with Roman and with HIMSS. Noom is another good example of a company that's taking what used to be the relationship between a person and a one-on-one provider and productizing it in a way that's much more accessible. And so we decided to start Outpace with that goal in mind. And we focused initially on how do we connect people with a human coach in a way that's much more efficient for that person and for that coach. We made a bunch of progress there, but ultimately working with a human coach is still at a level of expense that's hundreds or thousands of dollars a month. And as the rest of the world, we've been looking at generative AI and trying to understand, can we use that to actually take the place in many cases of a human coach? I think one of the most interesting applications of AI is to use AI as a sounding board. So not to replace people, but really to amplify people. And so we started working a few months ago on building out an AI coach based on everything that we've learned about what makes for a really effective conversation between a person and a coach. We just launched in the App Store last week. So Outpace is available now. Our first program is called Leveling Up as a Product Leader, and it's built to be the most comprehensive, personalized development program for product managers and product leaders that's existed, that combines really good, fast content to help you learn from the ideas of product thinkers and influencers, and then a conversational interface to have a conversation with that AI coach to think about how to put those ideas into practice in your own personal situation.
That's really amazing. I have two questions to this. So you said that you've been working on this for 18 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, we started about 18 months ago.
So when was this pivot where you're like, uh-oh, our original idea does not maybe seem to work? Like, because you probably also had to abandon some either resources or emotional investments that you probably made.
Huge emotional investments.
When did that happen?
With all of these things, it happens sort of slowly and then it happens in an instant. And so through the fall and early winter, we were getting our live coaching product into the market. And then in February timeframe, we said, let's set some really ambitious goals for the live coaching product to understand, is there product market fit here? And is there an opportunity that's really scalable? Because we're seeing some signs that there might be friction, both in terms of price points, as well as just in terms of the economic climate. A product that is on the order of hundreds of dollars a month is going to have a harder time in this climate than something that's tens of dollars a month. And so we launched a live coaching product. We onboarded our first users. We did find that, our hypothesis around there being too much friction in the market played out. And so we set ourselves a goal of here's the run rate that we want to be at within 4 weeks. And if we're not here, we know that we need to think about how to really go after a bigger opportunity that doesn't have the same friction. We had already started doing some prototyping and trying to understand, can we shift to AI and be really confident that we can deliver a fantastic experience for folks? And so around March timeframe, we fully committed to building an AI product, launching an AI product, and making that the main driver of the business strategy.
So how far were you off the mark that you set yourself? Was it close, or was it like, nah, this is clear?
In terms of the revenue? Yeah, we got to 6 figures in revenue pretty quickly. We had said we wanted to be at, I think the number was around like 250K in ARR within about 6 weeks. We broke the 6-figure target, but we weren't able to get to 250K. And so, we were able to get people onboarded. And that was, I think the biggest thing was there was proof that there was demand. One of the things that we saw when we reached out to folks is there were dozens of people that came back to us and said, I love what you're doing. I want to benefit from this, but it's just too expensive. And so that was one of the signals. And the fact that conversion wasn't where we wanted it to be was another signal. And that those two signals combined meant that there's actually there is demand for this, but we need to think about how to lower the price point and make it much more accessible. And so we decided to make the switch.
It is so wild. It is so wild. I feel like we have this mantra where we say it takes between 18 to 24 months to find product market fit, right? Everybody who's a serial entrepreneur tells you it doesn't matter how you just attack it. It's just it's just going to take that long. We kind of were in the same situation also with Joa, where we're just 6-figure revenue traction kind of achieved, but we're like, can we scale this efficiently? This took us too long to get the first 100K. And then you're and this was more like a, enterprise, that kind of deal business. And it is fascinating. And I think one of the most impressive pivots in this regard that I've seen, and I also think it's very bold of you to have the kind of the guts to say no, we're cutting this off. We're changing now after we have some traction, the direction. And I think that is harder than people actually know, because it's the lure of just okay, let's just keep going. Let's see what we can do. And then you kind of get yourself into the deep end. Yeah, it's always there. It's very fascinating.
It's incredibly hard. And I think that's one of the toughest parts of being an entrepreneur, and something that people don't talk a lot about is it's not black and white when things aren't working the way that you want. It's a nuanced thing, and it's a calculation. And I think too many startups get caught in this kind of Walking Dead mode where they've got a model that's sort of working. They've taken on a lot of capital around that model. There's a lot of momentum around that model. And that just becomes a recipe for disruption, where you're continuing down a path that's sort of working and something major can change in the market. In our case, it was generative AI. And if you're too focused on that path, that will prevent you from pivoting too quickly. And so we knew in October timeframe, so a little bit before when GPT-3.5 came out, we started looking at this and felt like this is an inflection point.
Yeah.
And it was on our radar as a way to make coaches more efficient. And then we realized over time when ChatGPT and GPT-4 came out that, actually, we've reached that inflection point, and it is feasible now to think about this space differently than before. And that if we didn't make the pivot, we needed to do it very consciously because we thought there was a better business model with a different approach. And if we did make the pivot, that's great because it's aligned with where things are going.
Yeah, and these pivots are absolutely fascinating because the first customer that you have to onboard to this is probably yourself. It's whenever this is happening, it's you've seen the numbers of Chegg, right? Chegg completely imploded, absolutely imploded. Some of these learning platforms are just dead now. And I think also from your perspective, I think this is the right bet. It makes sense to me. So by the way, I'm not an angel investor in your company. So just saying it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, we're also deep in the AI and ML space. And while it is a hype in some areas and everybody says that it's the death of content and learning and so forth, I am more betting on it the way that you do. I would probably even go further. Now, so I'm also a fan of Reforge. I also have my courses on Maven and all of this. I get it. But I think it's not so much about the content that you'll learn primarily that was the problem that is out there, because good content is everywhere, right? It's literally everywhere. It's the form of how you learn. And the thing that I found so enticing about AI, if it really gets to the quality and the content level, or the quality level that is sufficient, then you have a really, really big advantage that you do not have with in-person learning. And that is when you are tired or you don't feel like it, you have a bad day, you cannot just reschedule because Leah's waiting on the other hand,
Yep.
right? And then Leah also can have a bad day. And I think these things are not talked of quite a lot. Like, because also for me, when I have to speak on an international stage, if I'm feeling bad, I have to do it. I cannot reschedule, right? It's kind of like, so in my mind, this kind of puts down a little bit of the quality. So I think you're betting on the right horse here. So let's see how far it goes. And by the way, some of these interactions that we've replaced with AI, doctor's appointments and so forth, I am not sure whether AI is doing a worse job than the doctors. I mean, no offense, especially for the general practitioners. In some ways, when it comes to analyzing people's symptoms, they sometimes outperform human doctors already. So it's going to be interesting.
I read an interesting article today where a team did a study where they took some of the top medical questions on Reddit and then had doctors answer them and then had AI answer them. And patients found the AI generated answers to be both more useful and then interestingly, like dramatically more empathetic. And the question was like, well, how is an AI delivering a more empathetic, a more humane answer than a doctor? And it really just comes down to time, right? How much time and focus does a doctor have to take everything that's in their brain, regurgitate it in a way that's both empathetic and useful to a patient? Not enough, especially with the healthcare system the way it is today. And so it's not that like the AI knows more than the doctor. It can't because it's a closed system, but it can take the time to provide an answer that is detailed and an answer that's humane in a way that a doctor may not have the time to do. And I think that's a really powerful thing where, yeah, we will be interacting with AIs in a way that feels human because of that dynamic.
I have another hypothesis on this, which I would also love to hear from you what you think about it. So also specifically in regards to, so let's just stay with your AI coaching platform, right? So like I have a question about something that really bothers me, or like also with the doctors, it doesn't matter. The number one thing, if I ask clients that I had on what they value about me, it's not so much about, I mean, sure, it is about the insights that you deliver and like whether you're knowledgeable or whether you have revenue traction, whether you can steer the business in some way. But one of the main reasons that they keep telling me is like, you have a very fast turnaround time. I answer very fast, right? And if you think about it from the perspective of someone that's learning, like they have a question, something that really bothers me, specifically also if it's like a medical problem or whatever, having an initial fast first question or answer to your problem is also very valuable. Who cares if it's a little bit less accurate? Because if I have a pointer on, oh yeah, it could be this, then I can do my research afterwards myself. Because sometimes the time between, right? And this is also what we do when we talk about consumer onboarding. The first 20 seconds that someone is on your page, they matter. It matters. They don't wait for like, oh, can I please have a demo? Can you get back to me, Ravi, in 3 days with my demo account stuff? It's like, this just doesn't happen. So I think this short amount of reaction time will play a huge role for AI that no human will ever be able to deliver.
And that's a limitation of the traditional coaching market. Coaching sessions are typically every 2 weeks or maybe 1 to 2 weeks. And the lag time between experiencing something and talking to your coach about it 2 weeks later is just too long. Like you've gone through lots of different solutions. You've gone through a full range of emotions by the time you're actually talking to your coach. And one of the things that we found early on that was really helpful about Outpace is we've always had messaging with the coach being an important part of the experience. And what we found is there were cases where people would come out of a meeting with their boss, for example. There was one case where someone was expecting a promotion and she didn't get it. She was feeling really hurt and feeling underappreciated. And so she reached out minutes after that meeting and was able to get into a conversation that helped her think through her perspective on the situation, understand how she was reacting to it, and react to it in a way that was more proactive, more thoughtful than if she had just stewed on it for a week before being able to talk to her coach. And as a result, she could see things from her boss's perspective. She could put together a plan about how she wanted to respond and what the next steps were that was different than her initial reaction to the situation. And so, I think that's an incredibly important part of how AI will provide things that feel human, is because that real-time component is incredibly important.
Yeah. I wrote an article on this. This is so fascinating in the sense of like, I don't think it's so much about whether AI can imitate humans, because I feel like whenever it's about delivering value, and early dating apps were also like the same, right? They try to kind of imitate how real life dating is, right? And then at some point they started to differentiate themselves. You had different pricing models and so forth. I think I honestly feel like we have not seen the beginning of it. yet when it comes to learning any of these interactions, because sometimes it's not about imitating people. I mean, who tells you whether AI has to imitate a person? Maybe that's not necessary. If I'm getting what I need from it, if it makes me feel better, will people care? Probably not. And then they will go for AI, even if it says it's AI on the tin and it's not an actual person, you know? And I think this is not a wave that we can stop. So let's see what happens. I'm gonna be watching you, Ravi. I'm gonna be Ravi. Like I'm gonna be watching you. So you also said that you're probably looking for funding, right? Is that also correct right now?
Yeah, so we raised a pre-seed round right when we started, and now we're looking to raise a seed round, really focused on our new AI-oriented strategy. And so our ultimate goal is to build the first AI native platform for professional development. It's something that is, mobile focused, AI focused, and we think like there's a really important problem to solve in the professional development market, which is that professional development is one of these things that companies spend a lot of money on. It's a $350 billion market,
Yeah.
but there's low satisfaction rates. CEOs don't always feel like they're getting the ROI. Employees don't always feel like they're getting the support that they need. And so there is a significant problem to solve. And I think the underlying problem there stems from the same thing that Sal Khan recently talked about when he did his TED Talk about AI and how it relates to Khan Academy. And that was about 20 years ago. There was a really interesting study that found that there was a 2 standard deviation performance difference between people that learned in a classroom of 30 and people that received one-on-one tutorial. And so you could take someone who is a C student and get them into, top 5% or top 2% of their class just by providing one-on-one tuition. And so the problem is that we know what works from a learning and development standpoint. Personalized guidance works, but it's just been too unaffordable to deliver on a consistent basis. I think companies face that same thing. They've had to choose between learning that's really affordable, which includes on-demand courses like Coursera and Udemy, versus learning that is really effective like BetterUp and some of the other coaching platforms. And AI presents the opportunity to make that trade-off obsolete. And so we're basically raising our round to build out that AI native professional development platform that solves that trade-off and offers something that's both highly affordable and highly effective for people.
Cool. That sounds great. So any VC fund that reaches out to Ravi can do so in the show notes. I expect a 5% kickback on the ticket size. So
happy to do it.
being modest today, so it's totally fine. So use the discount code Leah Funds Ravi 2020. All right. So usually at the beginning of the podcast, we're already in the middle because I love talking about this kind of stuff. But like one of the questions that I ask every one of my guests is what do people get wrong about you as a person once they get to know you? Just like to pivot a little bit away from the AI topic.
Yeah, I think I've been able to lead large product teams. I've been fortunate to do that. It's something that I really enjoy doing. I had an opportunity as the head of product at Tinder. I led the consumer product team at Tripadvisor. And so I think people naturally assume that I'm a very high level person who doesn't get into the details as a result. But I love building product. I love spending time in Figma. I love writing specs. I love getting into the details. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to move earlier stage, is to get back to the nitty gritty of building things that are going to add value to people's lives. So I think that's one of the things that people sort of assume based on the experiences that I've had is different than what I really enjoy doing and some of the skills that I can bring to the table.
That's really interesting. So people would assume that you are more of like a manager in the clouds type. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Instead of like a tinkerer? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we just dispelled this. So everybody stop talking about this right now, about with Ravi. And if you had to select like one person or one kind of source of knowledge that really kicked your ass or like moved you really forward, was there someone very specific?
Yeah, it was Adam Medros, who's the head of product at Tripadvisor. I worked for Adam for about 5 years. It was absolutely a highlight of my career. Adam is this phenomenal person that can bring together really big long-term vision thinking with really detailed perspective on how to optimize a business. So he's just a great product thinker, has great product sense, and a really good commercial thinker. He also gave me a lot of opportunity while I was at Tripadvisor. So I learned a ton from him, both through learning and seeing how he works, as well as through some of the opportunities that I was afforded while I was there.
Was this the first time where you saw also product strategy as a concept at scale for the really first time? Or was this like, what was kind of like the tipping point there?
I think so. I think my prior experiences before Tripadvisor, I was at Microsoft for a number of years. I was working on Xbox, and Microsoft absolutely is great at product strategy. But that was at the beginning of my career, and the strategy was done so far up within the organization that I really didn't have hands-on experience with it. Then I went to business school, spent a little time in strategy consulting, so definitely got some experience there. But it was more like hands-off, more like conceptual than hands-on. And TripAdvisor was the first time where I think there was this really interesting connection between big strategic ideas and the day-to-day of what we need to do from a business standpoint. And that came from Adam as well as from Steve, the CEO of TripAdvisor. Both were just really good at understanding how to build systems that have exponential returns, user-generated review content being a great example of that, understanding that was from a vision standpoint that you can now... So TripAdvisor was founded in Web 1.0, early web days. And the underlying insight was, because you can connect all these travelers together, you can actually have people make travel decisions based on the reviews and insights of other travelers rather than the limited set of options that you might get from a travel agent. And then that big insight was connected to, there's a really interesting disruptive distribution opportunity here, which is SEO. And so we can take the reviews and opinions of travelers, turn that into user-generated content, and then use that to drive an SEO engine where TripAdvisor has the deepest and the most current content on every single place in the world that a person might go to. And as a result, TripAdvisor is going to have the best answer to any travel question. And so that combination of like really deep thinking around the nuts and bolts of the SEO opportunity combined with the long-term vision about how to add value to travelers was something that was the first time where I got kind of a front row seat to seeing how to connect those two things together. And I think every really successful business has an element of those two pieces coming together in a really interesting way.
Do you remember how TripAdvisor was back at that time? Like in terms of either revenue or employees?
Yeah, so it was about 1,300 employees when I joined, and it was between 1 and 2 billion in revenue when I joined.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, 1,300. So that was already like quite big. I think this is now at the size of roughly, Miro is around at that size right now. I think Miro is about 2,000, 2,500. I don't remember exactly. But it's quite interesting because I feel like, so I'm not sure whether this is true, but I would say about after a company reaches 150 people, you can sort of learn how to do strategy right, because you cannot anymore influence everything in detail, but you need to kind of create something that goes to a variety of a lot of teams, probably have growth teams, you probably have core product teams and so forth. So for me, this was kind of the moment where I'm like, that's really fascinating. I think something like 1,300 people would have been overwhelming for me. It feels very, very intimidating. You probably must have had, I don't know how many product teams TripAdvisor had back then, but it must have been at least 50 or something, right?
I think there were probably 20 teams altogether. Yeah. So there's a mobile team, social team, core hotels team, flights team. So I think about 20 teams altogether, and then maybe around, I'd be guessing, but I think 400 or 500 engineers. Probably not that many at that point.
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating thing as well. Okay, I'm not going to go now into
one of the, I think, really key learnings from TripAdvisor is around culture. And so like one of the things I learned at TripAdvisor and other places is culture is what people do when they don't know what to do. And at TripAdvisor, the thing that Steve really focused on were two things. One was speed wins. So in the absence of knowing what to do, just move quickly to try to move that ball down the field. And the second one was, if it's worth doing, it's worth measuring. And so this combined meant that TripAdvisor was really fast, really data oriented, and culturally, TripAdvisor really built that was something that every day was in the lifeblood of the company. So even though it was 1,300 people, it didn't feel like a 1,300 person company. It felt like, a 200 person company or a 300 person company, in part because that cultural value system was so clear. Steve would, even for every single new hire cohort, he would do a presentation on what it means for TripAdvisor to live by like a speed wins motto. And one of the things that he would talk about is like, if you're going to meet with someone, meet with them tomorrow or the day after. Don't schedule a meeting 2 weeks from now, because if you're scheduling a meeting 2 weeks from now, it's probably not worth doing. Either it's worth doing right now, or it's probably, not worth actively working on. And so that just created an environment that was constantly thinking about how to keep the pace up, which created this really fast learning loop, which I think was a key part of TripAdvisor being able to operate as an agile company despite its size.
Do you know the standard triangle where we talk about what you can adjust in a release, where we say like we have quality, we have scope, and then we have effort, and like
Yeah.
you can pull on one side and then it affects the other ones. I remember you saying one thing at some point where I was ready to challenge and like really jump in here, but you already kind of did. You added the asterisk of measuring. Because the one thing that I'm never compromising on is the quality of measurement. Like you can always reduce the quality of your entire product, but I want you to have a hypothesis before you launch, because it is so easy after you've launched anything with a little big data set to find something that looks good, and then you're kind of like, yeah, I think we can ship it, right? That's the one thing. But unfortunately, you already took the wind of my out of my sails.
My apologies.
That's all right. Okay.
I think it's there's like a 2x2 matrix in terms of thinking about the outcome of any product initiative. And you can ask 2 questions like, did we succeed and did we learn? And that's going to yield 4 quadrants. And so if you succeeded and you learned, that's great. That's amazing. If you failed and you learned, that's still pretty good. But if you succeeded and you didn't learn, I think a lot of product teams are constantly in that mode of like, they're seeing things that are winning, they're running experiments, they're throwing spaghetti against the wall, they're sticking with whatever sticks, but they don't actually understand why things are working. And so they don't know what the levers are for their product. And so, that's where measurement comes in. Like without the measurement, without the instrumentation, you're always stuck. Whether you succeed or fail, you're always stuck not learning. And that eventually is going to erode any product team's ability to make progress.
Do you measure the accuracy of of people that you work with when they make predictions? Because this is something that I started to recently do.
Yeah.
Because whenever we make predictions about whether something launches or not, right? Like I love the numbers that I had from Small PDF, for instance. I knew that I launched 300 hypotheses experiments and I failed with 70% of them. Matt Greenberg actually mocked me on this particular podcast about my bad rate, because he said like at Credit Karma, I succeeded like 80%. Total bullshit, Matt. That's not true. But, I kind of like measuring the accuracy of our predictions as well. Like how confident are you that this is going to hit? Like 80%, 20%, 30%. Do you do something like this to also kind of measure, prediction accuracy?
I like to think about this in terms of opportunity sizing. Like you should be able to opportunity size any initiative. And the key part of that is like 2 things. You'll have a model. It's going to be like a small model of maybe 3 or 4 lines in a spreadsheet, and you'll have some assumptions. And by putting those 2 together, you'll have some like estimate of the opportunity size. And the thing that really matters to me with that is not, did we achieve what we thought that we would achieve? Because you're going to fail more often than you succeed. That's just the nature of the beast. Yeah. But was the thinking that went into the opportunity size sufficiently detailed and plausible and defensible? And if it was, then you made a really good bet. You were able to look at something at a high qualitative level. You were able to put a detailed opportunity size around it. That gave you conviction. You went and did it. You got an answer. And so, if you succeeded, then you can actually help vet part of that model and use that opportunity sizing model for the next thing. And if you failed, you can look at it and say, okay, where did we go wrong? What part of this opportunity size was wrong? And how do we make sure that we're not making those incorrect assumptions in the future?
Yeah, I agree with this, but I feel like I'm trying to decide whether I'm clever or just petty when I talk to people about it in this way, because I feel like whenever someone tells me like, I'm 90% sure that this is going to happen. So like, okay, Ravi, how likely is it that you are going to have lunch tomorrow at 12 o'clock, like between 12 and 1 o'clock? And then you say, 90%. So that means out of 10 predictions, you can fail like only once, and then you are in the average, right? Like on the compared to average chance and so forth. Because I usually deal also with executives that tell me like, oh yeah, this is 100% going to happen, and then I'm like, okay, so what if, right? And then you go into the details that you also said, and I love plucking this stuff apart. I'm never sure whether I just sound clever or like just like someone that is really petty on us trying to destroy dreams. But I feel like this is also the job of a product manager, to just find weaknesses in predictions. Because whenever we don't think about something deeply, and I feel like the product manager should be the first person to think deeply about an opportunity. Do we have to license something on the outside? Do we have to deal with 5 different partners before we can launch something? Do we need to have this? Do we need to have that? They should be the ones with the most offensive estimates, because everyone else in the C-suite will have the very positive estimates. And I think that's usually how I think about it. I don't know. I'm really not sure whether I'm just clever or petty.
So a lot of things in product I found are the opposite ends of a spectrum. Like, to create a great product, it needs to be designed beautifully, and it also needs to like achieve quantitative goals, right? And so you have like design capability on one side, and then you have quantitative capability on the other. I think the other thing that's really important for product folks is to be both skeptical, but also to have conviction. And so, I think having too much conviction without healthy skepticism is a problem because it's going to lead you to take a lot of swings and make a lot of misses. Being overly skeptical and not understanding how to get to conviction is just going to catch you in irons and prevent you from making progress. And so, as with a lot of things in product, it's a matter of striking this really important balance.
So where I had my ass whooped was on things where I was very convinced that they were really good. And then I got my ass kicked by a little bit of skepticism. And I think the only comment that I would make to what you just said is, if you're really skeptic towards your own ideas, then you can be more convincing because you know what's already coming and you kind of disable kind of the criticism beforehand, right? So I kind of agree. So I'm 90% sure that I agree with you 100%. So,
and I think it's really like a matter of that healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
Healthy skepticism creates conviction. Being too skeptical creates indecision.
Yeah. Currently, I'm a head of product. I feel like if I'm not the one that at least sees the obvious mistakes in things, then who does, right? Like it is my job to also be, as you said, healthily skeptic. But once you have the buy-in, then you really pull forward with that vision. Yeah, I love this job. I really do. Like at the start of my career, I had a lot of problems with being seen as the person who just, is the dream destroyer. But they're very, very grateful once you actually do avoid a risk that could have wrecked your business, like not doing a pivot, because what you don't do, you just don't know whether you would have succeeded. So, yeah. So just going back a little bit, if we look also at your other positions, and it doesn't matter whether it's now about Tripadvisor or Tinder or whatever, like was there something that you would have done different now from today's perspective, where you are right now as a leader, as a serial entrepreneur, going from huge companies to smaller companies? What would you have changed in terms of your leadership style or anything for that matter?
Yeah. I think for me, one of the big transition points is if, as you move from an individual contributor to a manager to an executive, especially in product, I think there's some fundamental changes to the role. I think an IC product manager, they're really evaluated on their ability to build the product. A early product leader who's managing a team is evaluated on their ability to build the team that builds the product. And a product executive is evaluated on their ability to build the systems that build the teams that build the product. And each one of those things is drawing on some of the same fundamental capabilities, but also requires a new set of capabilities. And one of the specific areas that I found difficult for me, and I see this in other folks, is in order to become a rising manager and eventually an executive, you need to be a great leader, but oftentimes people have a particular style of leadership. And oftentimes the people that are the most successful leaders are really good team leaders. So they're great at understanding how to provide great feedback, how to organize their teams. And their focus is really on their team rather than leading outward and up. And so for me, like one of the things and that was like my bias. For me, one of the things that was really important was to understand the importance of managing up, the importance of managing across, so that you're not just leading your team, but you're actually creating organizational support as broadly as possible for what your team is doing. Because ultimately, as you become more and more senior within an organization, the impediment to your success is, of course, how well the product does, but it's also how well does the rest of the company support the initiatives of your product team. And so I think the two failure modes I've seen is PMs that are too focused on their team and not enough focused on managing up, and then PMs who are too focused on managing up and not enough focused on their team. I fell into the first camp, but that's something that I definitely would have done differently at Tinder. At Tinder, I was advocating for some pretty big changes to try to get past some of the saturation and growth that the company has seen. But those were big changes that got people out of their comfort zone. Reflecting on it, I think I could have done more to create more psychological safety around those changes, and that would have created more support for those changes ultimately.
Let's say Sequoia came around the corner and is just injecting 300 million into your business right now, and you have to build a completely new product organization relatively fast. Here's one question that I would have to you. Like, how do you structure at the moment the difference between strong IC leaders and like managers in that sense? Are you a fan of dual IC like career ladders, and how far can they go up? So like very specifically, the question for me is that how much is a principal or whatever titles you want to use, right? So like, let's assume like we have staff and then principal or whatever, like what is the highest level of IC in your mind possible without having to manage other people directly, maybe except for a junior or whatever it is. Are you also subscribing to this kind of model? Because I'm a big fan of like dual career ladders for PMs lately.
My opinion on this has changed. 5, 7 years ago, I absolutely felt like you should have single track within the product organization, and that ultimately a product manager's job is to drive value for the business in terms of the product. And the natural evolution of that is to take on more and more scope in terms of the amount of the product that you own and the amount of the team that you're working with in order to drive those results. So my strong feeling, and I still am biased towards this, is I feel like the most important thing for a product organization to get right is to think about what is your career ladder in terms of how you enable your best ICPMs to become broader in the impact that they're having and to help them level up within the organization. That presupposes that the natural thing that a company needs is product managers that become product leaders. I do think now there are some cases where it makes sense to have an IC track and to have sort of a dual track system. And that really has to do with where are there areas where there's a need for domain depth. And so I think a person needs to grow either in terms of breadth or in terms of depth. And that's what we see in engineering organizations. And so an engineering leader can grow in terms of the breadth of the engineering team that they can manage, or a principal engineer can grow in terms of the depth of the domain expertise they have in a particular area like machine learning or large scale software architecture. I think it's the same thing for a product. You need to be really clear about how people grow in terms of breadth. And then it might be the case that you also have areas where people need to grow in depth. It might be things like trust and safety or machine learning or other very technical parts of the product field. And in those cases, you may want to have a dual track where a person can grow in terms of that depth and not feel like their career is limited as a result.
So I agree on principle in terms of what they should do for the organization. And I think it's very interesting that you also said how engineering used to do it. So this concept of a 10x engineer, that was floating around all the time. But when you try to define it, I think there's two main concepts. One of them is the one super hacker that is enabled by everyone else, right? Everybody gets up in the morning and makes sure that, I don't know, Super Ravi is doing his job as fast as he can, right? But the organization enables you. And I think the inverse of this is that someone that is extremely skilled is teaching others and growing others at the same time, this is a model that I believe more into, because another problem is if you're dependent, and there are big companies that are dependent on single heads, characters, you're becoming essentially unfundable. You're becoming a bad investment case if you depend on being a Steve Jobs, either in engineering or in product that cannot be replaced. But what happens if they have an accident or whatever? And I think one of the things that I've been struggling with so first of all, I think I'm more on the boat dual career ladder for ICs. I see one problem when you elevate a really good IC into a management position, managing people directly. So let's say you're a group PM and you manage, I don't know what your limit is, but let's say 3 teams, 3 other ICs. This eats a lot of time just from having to manage the people itself. And I'm not yet sure what the correct balance is, but as soon as you elevate yourself over to director and then you manage group PMs, then it's kind of over. You're not anymore on the operational side where you can really influence and you also shouldn't maybe on the operational side. I'm not 100% convinced yet what I favor, but I try to make it happen for ICs, because the other really weird thing is that you have sometimes ICs that are absolutely exceptional and they own part of the company strategy, but they're not in a management layer. And that can create friction sometimes, on really weird levels where someone just asks, why is this person here? They're not a founder, or they're not this and that, some really weird operational problems that I see popping up sometimes. So I don't know. We still have organizational structures from the past with new concepts from the future. But I think in principle, we agree that you should have a broad impact on the entire company rather than just this is the super team that everybody kind of loves. So yeah, I don't know where the answer lies as well.
Yeah, I think one of the key questions to ask there is, as a company, what is our reward system? And then what's our organizational system? And the two don't necessarily need to be tied together. I think companies get in trouble when they treat promotions as rewards. And promotions are really organizational decisions. They say that this particular person is able to take on a role of increased scope and responsibility. And as a result, we want to put that person in that position because it's the right thing from an organizational design perspective. versus instead a company, which often happens, is to say, oh, this person's doing a good job, they deserve a raise, let's promote them. And that's conflating two really important things: a reward, which can be monetary, it can be something else, versus an organizational decision. And so I think of dual track really as a way of organizing. And if you use dual track as a way to organize, then you have to have a clear answer about what does it mean to become higher level within an individual contributor track, and why do we, from an organizational design perspective, need to have that within our organizational structure.
No.
That's a separate question from, we have an amazing ICPM and that person doesn't want to manage people. How do we reward them and make sure that they are being compensated commensurate to their value in the organization? And that, I think, shouldn't be solved with a dual track system. That should be solved with a really clear compensation model.
I could live with that. I think I would agree. And also think from an organizational perspective, this makes a lot of sense. There was a very interesting piece by Stuart Butterfield, the ex-CEO of Slack, where he said that one of the problems that we used to have is that people still think that, let's say you're in some kind of management position and you get budget, or you have some kind of leverage over the budget in some way. What you do is usually you tend to just hire more people as well. And then you lift yourself up as a manager because now you have more people because that's more prestigious and so forth. So I think there's also this kind of pressure and problem that we just have to deal with. And I don't know how to deal with this. So I think your approach to really separating it also, because this is also kind of a reward. People love status. They love saying yeah, I'm managing a team of 50 people instead of 5, right? And it is weird. It is really weird, right? I don't know what to do with it, but I think that's another pressure that you have from the bottoms up, from people just wanting to have status by how many people that they manage. And it still happens.
I think that's really dangerous, because once a person starts measuring their own progress and their own rewards in terms of the number of people that they manage, then that creates this momentum for a company to grow way beyond where it needs to be. And we're seeing now that with all of the reductions at Facebook and other companies, these companies have just grown far too quickly relative to the problem that they're trying to solve. And that creates a really hard experience for the people that are impacted by that, the people that are there after that. And it really, I think, robs a lot of value when people get into that mode.
That's totally true. And I think I know where it's coming from. If everything that you see in every all hands is a person with a lot of direct reports, I mean, you kind of create the problem yourself, right? I'm proud to say that I don't have the most direct reports in the company where I work at the moment. So this is good.
It's good. And you can, that's not necessarily it's not a measure of the scope and the degree of value that you can add. And I think Facebook and others have done a good job of trying to keep that in check by not relying too much on leveling and titles and things of that sort, but it can always get out of hand.
Yeah. All right, we're nearing the end already, and I had 10 more questions that I really would have loved for you to answer. So I'm just going to give you a choice, and you just take one of the 3. Okay. So basically, just take whatever favorite that you have, and then the rest will be just disappointed listeners. So the first one is, how do you either see the industry changing right now, with AI and everything? I mean, we talked about this a little bit, just on a broader side. How does the industry also for product managers change? And then the other thing is also from your more personal side, that I find very interesting is are you still dealing with insecurities, or has Ravi conquered all his demons? How do you deal with this? And let's take one of these 2. What would you like to address?
Yeah, I think from an insecurity standpoint, I think the biggest insecurity of starting a company later in your career is the insecurity of am I using my time in the right way? Because the opportunity cost is much, much higher. I can go into a senior role, make a really good salary, have a lot of equity, have a really big team, have a really big scope of impact. And there's things that I miss about that. I miss having that ability to lead a large team and have that team work on really big vision that's having an impact in a significant way in terms of thousands or millions of users. Versus now, it's the 3 of us. We're focused every day on the nitty gritty. We're dealing with user bases in the hundreds, not the thousands or millions. And so that's the insecurity is am I spending my time in the right way? And I think part of the reason why I started Outpace and I wanted to do this was, one, because I really enjoy building products. And then the second one was, Jeff Bezos has this great regret minimization framework where he asked the question of if I don't make this decision now, will I regret it when I'm 80? And I could clearly see that this was an opportunity and an area that I'm really passionate about. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to impact people's lives in a really positive way, even more so now with where AI is at. I think there's so many professionals that are in a really tough part of their career. And I think professional success does equate to personal happiness and personal wellness. And so it's an important problem to solve both professionally as well as personally. And so I felt like if I didn't take a stab at solving this, I would look back when I'm 80 and say, yeah, I didn't do the right thing no matter how it pans out. And so, that's a question that I'm constantly asking day to day to make sure that we're doing the things that are, I love our team. Everyone on our team is incredibly talented. And I want to make sure that we're all working on things where we're personally really satisfied and we're driving as much value as we possibly can.
I have to explore this thought a little bit further for myself after this podcast about the opportunity cost, because I feel like this is the one uniting thing that you see with more senior people. If you've been around the block a couple of times, it's not about the amount of money that you make, because people always ask you like, hey, so how much money do you make? Like, how much do you own of this company? How was the exit? It's always like, no. As a leader, senior, it doesn't matter whether it's product engineering or whatever, you're always like, you're being paid for managing opportunity costs. That's what it is. Reduce the risks, identify the ones that don't make sense and so forth. It's not just like driving revenue. It's about, do we drive the best revenue right now? And that also goes for you personally. So I absolutely love this take. I'm totally going to steal this and then pretend that it's mine. So
perfect. That sounds good.
No, that was a lot of fun, Ravi. Thank you so much. Do you want people to reach out to you? Then if so, I mean, aside from your other platform project, how do people reach out to you? Who do you want to talk to?
Yeah, I'm pretty accessible. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Just mention that you listen to the ProducTea podcast and I'll connect with you. Feel free to reach out. You can also subscribe to my newsletter. I have a question. When people subscribe, I ask people, what are they proudest of that week and what challenge did they face that week? I think at this point, hundreds of really interesting conversations with folks based on those couple of questions. And so, feel free to reach out and connect. I'd love to talk to you.
Thank you so much. This was a great hour and I hope you also enjoyed it. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the ProducTea with Leah. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leahtarin.com, which is leahtarin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.